So, before I begin tonight's talk, next month, everybody hear me okay? Next month on June 19th, Dr. Frink has invited a neurotologist. His name is Dr. Varun Varadarajan, familiarly known as Dr. V, to talk to us about cochlear implants, which should be really interesting. So please put that on your calendar. Tonight, we will learn about the past, present, and future of our wonderful Eschaton woodshop. And wouldn't you know it, I found some beads in my closet to embrace the theme. I heard about this kind of out there woodworker. He thought he was poplar, but he continued to go against the grain. So he pined away until he finally found a like-minded splinter group. Craig is a proud member of our woodshop team. His woodworking skills began at age 10 when he assisted his dad in building their family home. Pretty amazing. Today, he, along with our EVC woodworking artisans, craft beautiful items to treasure. And Craig will explore the transformation of an ordinary piece of wood into a masterpiece. Please welcome Craig Johnson.
Thank you, Judy. First, I'd like to put in a little disclaimer. I am not a woodworker extraordinaire. There are probably thousands and thousands of people out there that are better than I am. I really enjoy woodworking, and I'm proud of what I do, but I'm not quite sure that I'm up to extraordinaire yet. Tonight, I'm going to tell you a little bit of the history of the wood shop here at EVC, and also then I'll talk about how I built two of the projects that you can see on the table here. It started in 1992. 1992 was the year that Eschaton opened, and residents began to come into the Pink Palace here at EVC. Among those new residents that were coming in were 8 woodworkers who petitioned Eschaton to create a wood shop. And Eschaton did that. They provided 2 areas in the maintenance area, 2 rooms, and they bought a whole bunch of equipment for them. Over the years, most of that original equipment has been replaced, but it was all started in the very beginning, 31 years ago. Since then, the wood shop has put in $18,000 worth of equipment that we bought ourselves, and $1,600 worth of major repair work, plus thousands and thousands of dollars worth of residential material. This is what the wood shop looks like today. We have a computer-controlled router, a lathe contributed by one of the previous woodworkers with one of my pieces in it, a bandsaw contributed by a former resident, a woodworker resident, a router table, a planer, a belt sander and disc sander, a drum sander. Much of this equipment was purchased by the wood shop. We do a lot of sanding. This is 3 orbital sanders we use for final finishing. a sign-in sheet, bulletin board, and a major piece of equipment, a SawStop table saw, which has built-in safety features, and of course, wood on the back wall there. The back room is where we do our finishing and glue-up work. We have lots of hardware. We have lots of finishing materials, small tools, electrical tools, and of course, clamps. Woodworkers live on clamps. Safety is one of the issues that we take very seriously. Anyone at EVC can join the wood shop, and we hope that a little bit of training and a little bit of signed releases, you can become a wood shop person also. In the beginning, a lot of projects were made for the community, for Eschaton, and for personal use. The first picture there was toys that were made for charity. This is a lectern made for a local church, a cross made for EVC Community Church. And we made, and I say we, I'm using that in a broad sense. I wasn't there, but these are drawers made for ALU, which have been discontinued. This is the local card Christmas tree, which is in somewhat disrepair and underutilized, and we're thinking about discontinuing its use. Some of the things that we sell are Santas. They're a very popular item. Another success story is the Lazy Susans that you use every day in the dining room on the big round tables. Personal items aren't very well documented, but this is a rocking chair made by Graham Gilbertson. This is a vase that I made and entered into the California State Fair and won several prizes there. A baseball bat made by one of our executives. A fruit bowl also made for entering into the California State Fair. I'm going to talk now about two major projects, one of which is cutting boards. Cutting boards form the basis for many of our products, either as cutting boards or as cheese boards or several other products that you can see afterwards. First thing we need to do is buy wood. Hughes Lumber is our favorite go-to place. They've got lots and lots of wood and lots of different kinds of wood. We use about 9 different kinds of wood. Some of the boards that we get are in less than good condition, or they're too thick, or they're not finished correctly, and so we may put them through a planer. A planer has blades that turn at extremely high speeds, and it's like a plane, like a hand plane, only this is an automatic, very noisy planer. Every time you pass the board through, you lower the gap and take some more cuts. It produces an excellent finish, and we'll show you more in the next slide. After we've made the board straight, we then cut it to length, and this is based on the product that we're going to make. If we're going to make cutting boards, that's the size that this one is going to become, is a cutting board. We used the SawStop table saw, has a rotating circular saw blade with 60 teeth, and we cut the board to length. And we now need to cut it into strips or sticks to a specific width. So I move the fence over, lock it down, use a pusher stick, and push the board through, making a stick about 1.25 inches wide for the cutting boards. After we've cut the sticks, we rack them in this fixture here so that we have each board, each color of each wood represented, and we can then pull boards out to set up and make varying products. In this case, we're going to do a cutting board as I described, and so we've laid them out. You can see there's a red one in the middle, which is Padock, and then next to it is Wenji on either side, that's the black wood, and then there's maple. And so it's just a tasteful arrangement of the colors of the board and the kinds of wood. So it's a choice, not just a random selection of wood. We need to glue them together, so we've taken the boards from their configuration and turned them on edge, so the up edge is now the edge that's going to be put glue to the next one. The glue that we use is Titebond 3, an exceptionally good wood glue. It's been around for years. It's renowned for how strong it is. It's actually stronger than the wood itself. If I were to break the part, the wood would break before the glue would break. This is one of the most important steps in the process because everything depends on it being a good, solid glue joint. If you were to make the product and it to fall apart, that'd be terrible, or to break. We work on two surfaces. The red surface you see is a polyethylene sheet laid on a flat tabletop and provides a little bit of a cushion. On top of that, we put waxed paper to protect the surfaces. Wax paper is disposable, and we buy lots and lots of wax paper. After we glue it up, we turn it over, press it, put it against its neighbor, press it hard until we get a glue squeeze out, and we know that we've got enough glue. There's a working time for the glue, so we have to work fairly quickly, but some of these videos I've sped up because they're very repetitious. We don't necessarily work as fast as the video would indicate, although we would like to sometimes work that fast. He's putting the final sticks together, and you can see this is what the pattern is going to be this time. The wax paper is folded back on top to protect the bar clamps that we're going to use to squeeze it all together. These are bar clamps. They're adjustable stops on the one end and a screw on the other end. You pull it up as tight as you can, and then you tighten the screw. The first time the screw is moved is just to kind of snug it back together again. All the boards are the same thickness, so that means that when you lay it up this way, all of the tops should be level, but they're not necessarily. Sometimes they poke up. So the next step is going to be to kind of tap that stick back down in so it's nice and level. Use a board and a rubber hammer just to tap it down a little bit. After we've tapped it down, we want it to stay down, and so we use the next process, which is cauls, C-A-U-L-S. They're just flat boards that are clamped on either end, and they hold the panel down flat during the cure process. It's cured for several hours, just sitting on the bench. After we've finished, we pull down all the clamps, disassemble it, take the wax paper off, and put it in an oven that we've created from an old refrigerator. It holds 100 degrees Fahrenheit pretty well and cooks off the excess moisture of the glue. We've now got a kind of ugly looking panel, but we're going to sand it next. We use the drum sander. It has a rotating drum coated with sandpaper and a conveyor belt underneath that drum. The conveyor belt moves the piece underneath the drum at an even pace, and it scrubs the surface completely flat. All the glue, all the excess glue that was squeezed out is vacuumed off. After we finish one side, we turn it over and do the other side. So now we'll have two flat surfaces, top and bottom, and they're parallel to each other because of the way the machine works. It's called plano parallel. You can kind of see that the board is starting to look like a cutting board now. The next step is to trim it down to a rectangle. The sides are pretty straight, so we're just going to take just a skim coat off of one side and the other side. We set the fence so it does that. Turn the saw on and push it through with a pusher stick. Turn the piece over, adjust the fence a little bit to accommodate it, and push it through again. Now we're using a miter gauge, which is a 90-degree miter gauge, so that we cut the ends off square. And we've created, getting closer and closer to a cutting board here. It's now a rectangle, but it has sharp edges on it. And the sharp edges might not be the greatest in the world. So what we're going to do is we're going to knock those edges off and put a little bit of a round on those edges. And what we're using is the router and the router table. It's a high-speed bit with a semicircular cutting edge, and as we pass the board through, it puts a quarter round on the edge of the board. Okay, we've gone through, we've got it all cleaned up. It's not quite completely flat, completely smooth now, so we have 3 orbital sanders of varying degrees, grits, to make it final sand it to a nice smooth surface. It's inside a sanding booth, which is an enclosed booth, and we've got it laid on a downdraft table. Then we pull a vacuum on that with a dust collector that sucks all of the dust, or most of the dust, out of the orbital sander, and also down through the downdraft table. Sawdust is our second most important product, but we don't like it. This is the vacuum, this is the dust collector. This is not your standard home home vacuum cleaner. This is a powerful 3 horsepower industrial dust collector. After we're all finished, we do the finishing. This is another kind of a cutting board that we're doing here, but we're using mineral oil to coat it. It soaks into the wood and provides a protective finish, and it's food safe. So it's perfect for a cutting board. And now we just let it sit until it soaks in and it's ready for use. The next product I'm going to talk about is segmented wood turning. I'm pretty new at wood turning. I've only been doing it for a couple of years, but a friend of mine does wood turning, and I got excited about it. I get inspiration from another product or another thing that I've seen. This is a solid bowl that I liked. I do segmented wood turning. Ed Larson, who you saw in the display case about a month ago, does different kinds of turning, but we each have our one's a kind of turning that we like to do. After I've decided to sketch one as if I sliced if I sliced the bowl down like this, it's a picture of the shape of the bowl. I then take it and I'm going to make rings out of it as if I've sliced it this way. So I turn all that into an Excel spreadsheet, which is nothing more than high school geometry, to create the patterns for the rings that I'm going to make. And this is what it's going to look like in the raw. There are a whole series of rings put together that are going to form a bowl shaped, and then I'm going to machine it into a real bowl. And I'll show you how those rings are made. So first we get the boards, same boards that we used for the cutting board, and cut it to a strip that's commensurate with the design of the bowl. I'm going to cut the strips using a wedgie board designed by Jerry Bennett, a famous segmented wood turner. I'm going to need a whole bunch of segments that are sort of trapezoidal shaped, and they're going to put them together and form a ring. There's going to be 18 segments to form that ring. And each segment has an angle of 20 degrees to make a full 360-degree ring. So it's 20 times 18 is 360 degrees, and it's going to make a ring. And I'll show you how that ring is put together. But first of all, I have to cut the segments. This is a very, very precise cutting. It's cut to an accuracy of 1/10 of 1 degree. To give you an idea what that means, if you took a mug and put it on the tabletop and had a piece of paper under one edge of the mug, it would tilt the mug 1/10 of a degree. So that's the accuracy that I have to have in the 20 degrees that I'm cutting them. If I don't do that, the ring will not be a ring. I switch the stick from one holder to the next, and that gives me the angle. I'm not sure how much you can see about how it, when it falls off the saw, but you can see the angle on the stick. We'll have a closer view of that in a few minutes. The cutting forms a burr on the end of the segment. And so I'm next going to take and sand that burr off. And that's real simple. It's a piece of sandpaper on a flat board, and I just pull the segment down until the burr disappears. So now I've got perfect segments. Well, I think I do. First of all, I want to check the perfect segments to see if they're really as good as I thought they were. So I use a digital caliper. I put the segment in the digital caliper and measure to see if I'm close, how close I am to 20 degrees. That one was very close. And so is this one. You can see in the lower right-hand readout that it's going to come up to 20 degrees. I wiggle it until the faces are exactly in contact with the digital gauge. So all of my segments are good. All of them are 20 degrees plus or minus 1.1. And now I'm going to put them together like I need to form one of the rings in the bowl. You may remember that there was a spiral of white that came up the side of the bowl. That's the maple piece. The darker segments are saplis. So I have 5 segments of saplis and 1 segment of maple. Together there's 5 segments of saplis, 1 of maple times 3 is 18. I have a limited amount of time to glue all this together. So if I make the ring and set it up right, I'm going to work my way all the way around that ring and glue them each piece. First thing I do is butter a segment with glue, nice thick glue segment. Take the next segment, push them together, make sure they're aligned one to the other, set it up, and move on to the next segment. Butter it up. Stick it on and watch the glue ease out. That means I've got plenty of glue on it. I've sped the video up a little bit, but I would like to work that fast. I try to keep them all aligned, but you'll see it at the very end. It's not quite aligned, but it's going to become aligned before it's all over. Same Titebond 3 glue that I used on the cutting board. Okay, so I got my ring almost, just a little bit of tweaking there, a little bit of alignment. Just make sure that each piece touches the other piece in exactly the same way. Then I put a hose clamp, or an assemblage of 3 or 4 hose clamps, daisy chained together. Tighten the hose clamp a little bit, tweak the alignment a little bit, go back and forth a few times just to make sure that I'm going to get what I really want to do here. Because the angles are so precise, those pieces fit really tightly to each other. I'm just double checking all of the alignment now. I'm using a drill driver now to do the final tightening of the hose clamps. Looks pretty good. A few more taps just to make sure, and I'm ready to clamp it all up together. I'll move it over to the table, the same one that I was using for the cutting board, the red polyethylene sheeting, the wax paper on top, a plywood board, sort of like a caul, but it's a big sheet of plywood instead. And what I'm going to do with this is to press down on the ring so that it doesn't move. I made sure that it's all nice and flat, but I want it to stay that way through the gluing process. So I put that stack of plywood on top, tap it a few times to make sure that everything is nice and flat. Put that bench clamp on it. Strike it a few times to seat it and let it sit for a few hours to cure. After it's cured, I disassemble it, pull it apart, put it in our famous oven, and let it dry some of the moisture out of the glue up. Next, go through the drum sander, the same drum sander I've been using all along. A workhorse drum sander. I'm not quite sure what we did before we bought that. I'm trying to do the same thing that I did on the cutting board. I sand one side to make it absolutely flat, to make sure all the glue is gone. Then I turn it over and sand the other side. You notice I'm wearing earmuffs. It's a fairly noisy machine, and my hearing is bad enough as it is without making it worse. So that's one ring out of 9. And here's a picture of the joints on that ring I just made. You can't see the joint. There's 3 segments shown, and the joint is so tight you can't see it. So now I've got all my rings. I'm going to put them together the way they're supposed to, just to make sure that every ring is the right size, every piece is flat, everything fits together. This is just a dry run to make sure that I'm going to be making a bowl that's the right size. I'm putting it together upside down here. That ring that's on the tabletop is a mixture of Cadillacs. The black ring is a Cadillacs, and the one in the center is called Black Limba. The other rings are Sapele and Maple, and then the top ring is my base ring, and that's made of Cadillacs with a center of maple. Okay, I turned it upside down now, so it looks like a bowl. Sort of. Not quite there, but it's getting there. The base ring, I cut a slot in because somehow I need to chuck it in the lathe, and by cutting a slot in it, I can screw a Novichok into there. And I'll show you the Novichok in a second here. I'm going to show you how I put the rings together, how I glue the rings together to make the bowl. I showed you the dry stack up, but this is how it's glued together. Titebond 3 glue, put it on both surfaces, spread it around. Put the bowl on top in the right configuration so that the maple is spiraling down the side. Seat it, kind of align it. That silver thing on top is the Novichok. It's a big, heavy block of steel. Okay, there's the bench clamp, and now I'm striking the bench clamp to seat it. Checking the alignment. And that's what it looks like in the cure as it's being cured. There's 9, 10 rings, 10 rings. I'm going to do turning next, but this is the tool that I'm going to use for cutting into the rings. It's called a 55 degrees swept back bowl gouge. It's a very complicated cut, but it does an amazing job. It can do many different kinds of cuts. And this is how I sharpen it. There's a grinding wheel on the left, and then there's called a one-step Wolverine tool that gives the configuration. I'm putting the half-completed bowl on the lathe now. The reason it's only half completed is because I need to get to the bottom of the bowl, and I can't get to it if the sides are too high. So first of all, I make just a few of the rings together to get the bottom half of the bowl. Okay, I've got my 55 degrees swept back bowl gouge, and I'm going to cut some of the internals of the bowl. It's a shearing action, so what I get coming off are shavings, not so much sawdust, but more shavings. They're long streamers of wood that come off. Lots and lots of it. The turning videos are a little repetitious, but just bear with me. And there's all sorts of stuff happening here, and you can see it. You can start to see the bowl taking shape as I cut. All those square pieces of rings are now being turned away by the cutter. I hold the tool pretty tightly in my hand because if it was loose, it might catch in the wood. And it would cut a divot out of the bowl. So I don't want that to happen. Like I said in the beginning, I think I'm fairly new at turning. I do other woodworking, but I've only been turning for a couple of years now. It's a completely different form of wood shop. I stop fairly often because you can't really appreciate how much is being removed just by looking at it while it's spinning. You sort of have to feel it and get close to it and touch it and look at it closely to understand how much is being taken off. And once you've taken it off, there's no putting it back. So I go at it pretty slowly. Here I've turned the bowl gouge upside down, and it's a scraper now instead of a shearing action. The scraper produces more sawdust kinds of things than shearing produces ribbons of shavings. Here's another tool that I use. It's called a skew. It has a slight round on the nose, which is pretty close to the configuration I want the bottom of the bowl to be. You'll just see mostly sawdust being generated now. I'm trying to be as careful as I can not to touch the base, because that's a flat base of maple. And I don't really want it to be rounded, I just want it to be nice and flat. So I have to be very careful to watch the bowl configuration come down and just touch the flat bottom and then go into the bowl shape. Again, I keep stopping, checking it, feeling it, do whatever I need to do to keep from going too far. This is another tool called a round nose scraper. Over the years, we've had many woodworkers come through the wood shop and they leave their tools behind usually because perhaps they're going to ALU or memory care or whatever. So we have lots of pieces of equipment that are still left over. And that forms a lot of the wood shop inventory, is residents leaving their tools behind, which we're very grateful for. Okay, I've gotten to the configuration that I like, only there's some scratching of the surface by the tools, and I sand that out. So this will be sanded out to its final surface finish, and then I'll build rings on top of this to do the sidewalls. Okay, now we've got the entire inside done on the bottom half of the bowl, and now I'm going to do the outside. Very similar tooling. 55-degree swept back bowl gouge, but I'm going to do just a rough job because I'm going to put more rings on, and I can always work on the outside. The inside is a little bit of a problem. I need to finish it, but the outside, all I want to do is get it roughly the right way. First of all, I cut the nibs on the made-up ring, cut those down to form a circular shape. That gives me a form to glue the next set of rings to. Check it to make sure all of the flats have been milled off. I'm now going to smooth it a little bit and knock that corner off. That's the top ring. You can see it all starting to take the shape of the bowl. That was a little catch there. It just grabs the tool and takes a chunk out. That's why I stopped it and just to make sure it's okay. No major damage. But the nibs running at high speed like that catch the tool sometimes. You can tell this is a nice, clean operation. Also notice that I've got a big, heavy mask on, and that has a ventilation feature to it where it sucks air from behind me, runs it through a 5-micron filter, and then flushes down the front of my face. So I have nice clean air that I'm breathing. And the mask is protective in case the bowl should come apart. Also have ear protection on because between the dust collector and the lathe, that was another catch there. Like I say, turning is still pretty new to me, so. But you recognize these things, you learn from them. And it just take that and it goes on until I've built up all the rings and done all the turning, and then I do the finishing. And this is one of the finished bowls that I'll show you after the forum here. This particular one is a mixture of polyurethane and Danish oil, which is a polymerized wood. We all need to stay active and challenged, both physically and mentally. I enjoy woodworking. It's frustrating, challenging, creative, and rewarding. And you end up at a product that has a wow factor. We will have another display in June in the lobby, and we hope you find some products for December delivery. Thank you for your attention, and come up here after the questions to look at some of our products. Mayanne Sheldon and Dick Schultz and Bob Meyer will be up here, and you ask them all the questions you want to, and I'm sure that you'll learn a lot, and maybe you'll get interested and inspired and come down and visit the wood shop or become one of the woodworkers. Thank you. You want to come in, Frank?
Well, that was wonderful, wonderful, and beautiful, and I congratulate you. My question is, just want to know how many hours do you estimate that you take to do that whole creation?
The one in the center took infinite amounts of time. This bowl that I kind of held up, this one took 60 hours, and this one took 40 hours. So I'm starting to cut down on my hours, but it's still, as I say to people, I can't afford to sell them. I can only give them away. So, so these are for my daughters, but it's spread. It's not 40 hours that you could do in a week. It's 40 hours spread over 3-4 weeks. Yes, Marianne.
I sort of can't get away from my background as a nurse. So I find myself wondering if you've had people come in to be woodworkers and then they find out they're allergic to sawdust or wood shavings or the mahogany or the teak or whatever, because you were very protected, but you had all those shavings on your arms and your hands. So has
Yeah.
that ever come up?
I'm very, very allergic to a wood called Palfaro. And funny story, I was building 3 jewelry boxes for my daughter, and in the middle of it, I found out I was allergic. So I'd work for an hour, shower, go back the next night, work for an hour, shower. It's a long process, but we really don't wear gloves because of we need to get the feel of things, but we can put on bunny suits, we can put on elastic cuffs. We had protective headgear for the ears, button up our collar. There's a lot of things that you can do to keep away from the sawdust, and showering and washing your hands afterwards does pretty well for most allergies. I'm a little bit allergic to some of the woods also, but I just take care with my contact. It's a contact dermatitis thing. There's also barrier creams, which I sometimes, if I'm gonna, sometimes I'll use barrier creams, which are greaseless barrier creams. You can coat your hands with that. That helps some too.
That was very interesting, Craig. I'm wondering who the videographer was that was behind you all that time with the camera.
Oh, I set it up on a tripod. I put an iPhone up on a tripod, turned it on, and worked. Some of the glue ups of the cutting boards, that was Dick Schultz. Let's see who else was there. I think other than that, I think I did most of them. Just set the camera up, turn it on, do the thing, break it down, move on. So a lot of editing at the end, but that was all iPhone. That's all iPhone video.
Again, like everybody else said, thank you very much. The passion and the quality comes through. So my question is, do you consider woodwork a solitary sport, or do you find it a group event?
Most of my training, most of my life, I used woodworking completely alone. When I moved to Eschaton, and one of the reasons I moved to Eschaton was the wood shop. There's a fantastically great group of people in the wood shop. We bond pretty well. We share ideas. We each have different specialties that we excel in, but we share all of our products and we work cohesively and well together. It's a group effort to put all this together. I'm the only one that's turning. The others have expressed interest, but nobody has stepped up to the line yet. But everything else we make together.
Oh, now you're going to hear from a wood turner. Thank you, Craig. That was very well done.
Thank you.
And I've been a wood turner for 20 years or so. And talking about a solitary event, when you're just making and turning your pieces, that is right. When I go down to my shop, put things together, work for a little while, come back, go back and forth, and get it done. But there's also a fraternity out there of wood turners or woodworkers that is very large and very much a family. I belong to 2 different wood turning clubs, and basically the people that are here is a wood turning club. And Craig, you've interested me again in getting down there and using the lathe, so I'm going to take you up on it.
Dick and Bob and Mayan, if you want to come up here, you can talk about some of the things we make. And we had many of these displayed at the activities fair, but there were so many exhibits, there were so many good exhibits, it was kind of chaotic. And we would have people come by and spend 2 minutes and say, and then move on. So if there's anything that you want to look at and touch here, we can talk about it. And I'm hoping that this will be inspirational when we have our display in June, and you'll understand, and because it's just going to be behind glass, and that's it. But here, you can touch it and feel it and appreciate it more. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Craig. Very nice.